The image of the tortured genius is a staple of our culture. We've seen it in the stories of poets who couldn't sleep, mathematicians who were haunted by the very numbers they mastered, and the eccentric inventors who seemed to vibrate on a different frequency than the rest of the world. We usually dismiss this as a literary trope or a side effect of a busy mind. We tell ourselves that high intelligence is the ultimate evolutionary prize, a biological superpower that grants a clearer view of the universe. But what if that superpower comes with a hidden physiological tax? What if the very thing that makes a brain brilliant also makes the body a battlefield? Imagine for a moment that your brain is a high-performance racing engine. It processes data at speeds most people can't fathom, spotting patterns in the chaos and weaving complex tapestries of thought from a single thread of information. Now, imagine putting that engine into a chassis that wasn't built to handle the heat. The vibrations start to rattle the bolts. The sensors become so sensitive that they mistake a gust of wind for a collision. This is the hyperbrain, hyperbody hypothesis, and it suggests that for a significant portion of the most gifted among us, the price of a high IQ is a life lived in a state of permanent overactivation. The story begins not in a laboratory, but in the self-reported lives of thousands of members of Mensa, the high IQ society whose members score in the top 2% of the population. Researchers led by Ruth Karpinski decided to look past the academic success and the high income potential often associated with intelligence. They wanted to know what was happening under the surface. They asked these individuals about their mental health and, crucially, their physical health. What they found was a statistical anomaly that should have been impossible if intelligence were purely a positive trait. These individuals weren't just slightly more prone to a few sniffles. They were reporting rates of mood disorders, anxiety, ADHD, and autism that were significantly higher than the national average. But the real shock came when the researchers looked at the body. The members of this high IQ group were suffering from environmental and food allergies, asthma, and autoimmune diseases at a rate that defied standard medical expectations. It was as if their immune systems were as smart and hyper-reactive as their brains. This wasn't just a coincidence. It was a correlation with high statistical significance, suggesting that a high IQ might actually be a risk factor for a body that is perpetually on the defensive. To understand why this happens, we have to look at the concept of overexcitability. In the world of psychology, a gifted brain isn't just faster, it's more porous. It takes in more of the world. A person with high intellectual capacity isn't just thinking more, they are feeling more, hearing more, and sensing more. Every stimulus, a flickering light, a distant hum, the texture of a sweater, is processed with an intensity that can be overwhelming. This is the hyperbrain. But the brain doesn't exist in a vacuum. It is the command center for the entire nervous system. If the command center is constantly screaming danger because it's over-processing the environment, the body's defense systems, the immune system, and the inflammatory response stay in a state of high alert. This leads us to a fascinating and somewhat unsettling realization: the hyperbody. When the nervous system is chronically over-aroused, the immune system begins to misfire. It starts treating the world as a threat. A speck of pollen isn't just a harmless particle, it's an invader. A specific protein in a peanut isn't just food, it's a biological emergency. This creates a feedback loop where the brilliance of the mind creates a physiological state of stress, which in turn weakens the body's ability to distinguish between a real threat and a harmless environmental factor. But scientists didn't stop at self-reported surveys. They wanted to see if this connection was written into the very architecture of the brain itself. In a massive study of over 1,200 healthy, educated young adults, researchers looked at the physical volume of the brain's gray matter. They found something extraordinary. Individuals with higher allergic tendencies, the people who sneeze the most in the spring or have to be the most careful at dinner, actually had larger gray matter volumes in key areas of the brain. These clusters were located in the dorsal part of the cerebral neocortex, the right anterior insula, and the cerebellum. The neocortex is the seat of high-level thinking, the part of the brain that makes us uniquely human. The insula is involved in our internal bodily states. The fact that these areas are physically larger in people with allergies suggests a deep structural link between the sensitivity of the mind and the sensitivity of the immune system. Interestingly, this larger brain volume and the tendency toward allergies both showed a significant positive correlation with spatial ability. If you are someone who can effortlessly rotate a complex 3D shape in your mind's eye, there is a statistically higher chance that you also struggle with hay fever. It is a trade-off written into your biology, the ability to navigate the abstract world of space and geometry in exchange for a body that reacts violently to the physical world. This phenomenon isn't just something that develops in adulthood. We can see its roots in the earliest stages of life. A recent study conducted in Turkey focused on gifted children between the ages of 6 and 14. They compared these children to their peers of typical intelligence and found the same pattern repeating itself with heartbreaking clarity. The gifted children were significantly more likely to suffer from recurrent ear infections and asthma. But perhaps most telling was their relationship with food. These gifted children showed a much higher rate of food selectivity, what we often call picky eating. To an outsider, it looks like a behavioral problem. To a scientist, it looks like a sensory defense mechanism. For a child with a hypersensitive brain, the texture of a tomato or the smell of broccoli isn't just a preference, it's a sensory assault. The study found that 50% of the gifted children who were very selective about their food also had asthma. There was a direct line between the way their brains processed the world and the way their bodies reacted to it. The high-frequency child is navigating a world that is simply too loud, too bright, and too flavorful for their delicate physiological tuning. So why does this matter to the rest of us? It changes the way we define health and intelligence. For decades, we have treated the mind and the body as two separate entities. We go to a psychologist for our anxiety and an allergist for our asthma, never considering that they might be two symptoms of the exact same underlying condition. These findings suggest that we are a single integrated circuit. A hyper-brain, hyper-body association implies that some of the most challenging psychological and physiological conditions are not bugs in the human system, but rather the features of a specific kind of high-functioning biology. It forces us to ask a difficult question. Is there an evolutionary limit to intelligence? If a more powerful brain inevitably leads to a more fragile body, perhaps there is a biological ceiling on how smart a species can become before its own immune system turns against it. It paints a picture of the human experience, where the most brilliant lights also burn the hottest and require the most protection. Next time you see someone who seems a bit too much, the person who is incredibly bright, but also incredibly sensitive, the one who notices the tiny details but can't stand the noise of a crowded room, the one who can solve the hardest problems but is sidelined by a change in the seasons, look at them differently. They aren't just quirky or sickly. They are likely living with a high-performance system that is constantly sensing the world at an intensity the rest of us can barely imagine. We are beginning to see that the curse of the gifted is real, but it is also a testament to the incredible complexity of the human organism. Our greatest strengths and our greatest vulnerabilities are often two sides of the same coin. As we continue to peel back the layers of psychoneuroimmunology, we may find that the secret to better health isn't just in treating the body or the mind, but in learning how to tune the entire instrument. Pay attention the next time you feel your own senses sharpening or your body reacting to the world around you. You might just find that your weaknesses are the shadows cast by your greatest intellectual strengths. This research doesn't just change how we see the gifted, it changes how we see the very nature of being human. We are not just thinking beings. We are feeling, reacting, and vibrating organisms, where every thought has a physical echo, and every allergy might just be a sign of a mind that is seeing a little bit more of the world than it was designed to handle. Would you like me to dive deeper into the specific neurological pathways that connect the neocortex to the inflammatory response?